All right. Oh, is the floor mine? All right. Good morning, everyone. Thank you so much for reading out my bio. Like I said, my name is Lindsay Machona Mayanzanise, and I work here in Edmonton. I work with one of the big banks here in Canada, and the Schmidt Investment Group. We have a very innovative funding model where for the first 18 months of us taking on a client, we direct all that revenue towards the foundation that I am executive director for. And we build schools in marginalized communities around the world. Right now, we are building schools in Guatemala. So this model does not rely on donations, but it's from the revenue of the investment management company and the bank. This is how we are able to build these schools. And so what we also do for our clients is that we match the community initiatives with the client, and so they also get a chance to travel to the communities that we're building schools in, to meet with the community leaders, and these are hard-to-reach communities that would take, like a 20-kilometer journey would probably take you 2 hours because, you know, these are remote and literally forgotten communities. So we are reaching out to those communities and making sure that children have access to education. So that is the work that I am involved in, and really happy and thankful for Africa Center with the work that they're doing for Black communities here in Edmonton and in Western Canada, and really grateful for the opportunity to be moderating this panel this morning. So I am going to be calling up our panelists, starting with Mr. Sam Juru. They will be introducing themselves once we get into the discussion. And yeah, can we give him a round of applause? And thank you. And then Neka as well. We have not had the chance to meet, so awesome, awesome. And then Franklin as well, if you could come up to the stage, please. Awesome, thank you. All right, awesome. Thank you so much for giving us your time this morning, and we'll jump right into the discussion. So if you could please start by introducing yourself and tell us what you do. I'll start with you, Sam.
Thank you, Liz. Hi, everyone. Good to be here. My name is Sam Juru, and I'm with the City of Edmonton, and I'm the city's lead for immigration, settlement, and anti-racism. And a part of that work also involves managing and leading the city's grant and funding portfolio, specific to our non-for-profit sector here in Edmonton, ethnocultural, organizations, as well as the anti-racism space. Before joining the city, I worked for Global Affairs Canada for about 7 years, and I worked as an evaluator and also managing projects that are funded by the Canadian government in different sub-Saharan African countries. So it's a pleasure to be here.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Sam. And over to you, Neka.
Hi, everyone. My name is Neka Otowulu. I work with the Edmonton Community Foundation as the Director of Communications and Equity Strategy. So I wear 2 hats for now, and that's pivoting next month to be the Director of Strategic Initiatives. Before my journey to ECF, I was the Executive Director of a local charity in BC on the Vancouver Island, the Nanaimo Science and Sustainability Society. My role at ECF is leading the comms team and also leading the equity strategy for the organization. Initially, it was all about the internal equity strategy, but then it had to pivot to how we could better serve our community. ECF is a location-based community foundation, and so our area or catchment area is the Edmonton CDMA. Thank you.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Neka. You're welcome.
Good morning. My name is Franklin Bugeb. I am the Executive Director for Black Build Up. Black Build Up is an organization that helps in building the capacity of other organizations. We also advocate for Black Canadians, and we help newcomers with a range of services. I'm also the co-founder and Chief Executive Officer for Solid Rock Life and Business, which is a management consulting company. We have an extensive presence in the US and in a number of African countries. Most of our services revolve around capacity building. For example, for the last 2-3 years, we've trained about 12,000 organizations in East Africa. I'm also a consultant. So most recently, I led the team that managed a $500 million acquisition plan for the MONUSCO, which is the largest peacekeeping mission, of the United Nations, based out of DRC. I'm very passionate about capacity building, obviously, but more important, I'm very passionate in the promotion and advancement for Black people for their socioeconomic security. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much for sharing a little bit about yourselves with us. So we'll jump straight into the discussion. So I'll start by asking you what your understanding of sustainability is as it relates to Black-led organizations. I'll start with you, Sam.
Sure. I think about sustainability for Black-led organizations in different ways. I think when we think about sustainability, there's a bias to quickly drift towards the finances and financial sustainability. But I think I'll flip that outcome and say that the financial stability of an organization is not a process within itself or the sustainability, but is actually the outcome of a series of upfront investments that ensure that an organization is sustainable. So maybe I'll touch one or two spaces that are important. I think that an organization's stability, and this I think has to do with its governance, how it's managed, its integrity. I think this is something that is really important in ensuring that there's a solid organization that is well-driven, that develops reputation within community, and of course as well as with funders, and is really a reputable organization. The other thing is, I think an organization's objective impact. So an organization that clearly understands its mission and clearly understands its goals and has carved out niche space within the city or within the province that you're working in, and it's really understood that this is our space, this is our mandate, and this is the mission that we work with. And I think this then resonates with funders, because as funders, part of what we do is we look at the ecosystems of supports, right? And we understand that this organization is working for youth employment. This organization is working, the niche here is entrepreneurial and employment support for women. So when you carve out your niche and you're a stable organization, what that does is it gives you reputation and credibility, not only within the community and ultimate impact, but also with funders. And I think that creates sustainability.
Thank you so much. I like what you say there about flipping it over, and we have some oversight when it comes to things like that. We go with the mainstream definition of things, and we forget to look at the underlying systems that are operating there. So thank you so much for bringing that up. And Nneka, in your experience, how would you define sustainability?
For me, I would define it as the ability for Black-led, Black-serving, and Black-focused organizations to continue achieving long-term success while taking care of the immediate pressures and priorities. That's tough. As a funder, we see it happen on a daily basis, and we see the struggle. But then we've also seen some successes as well with some B3 organizations, local ones, where they have targeted leadership development, ways to have sustainable funding, and also pivoting and leveraging on partnerships and collaborations. We can't mention that too much. And also where they also leverage on technology as well. If there's one thing that we've learned from the past couple of years is that there's nothing constant, like change happens. The pandemic taught us that we could actually leverage on the little things we have and excel in what we do. So that's what I see on my own context for it.
Absolutely. We're going to be going deeper into what you just raised there about balancing the need for short-term funding and long-term sustainability. Thank you so much for sharing that. And over to you, Franklin. How would you define sustainability?
When you're usually the third person that have to answer, and you're very learned, panelist, you're usually put on a challenging spot.
You can just build on what they have said already.
Yes.
Yeah.
So, when I think about sustainability, so I have a lot of organizations that come to me, and most of the time they view it in a programmatic manner, in project-based. Oh, Franklin, we have this project, and the donor, the funder, is requesting, that we need to show sustainability. And he touched a bit on that. I believe that fundamentally an organization needs to view it in 3, or let's say 4 ways. First of all, the people, right? You need to have an organization that is well structured, where you have succession planning, you have proper personal development, training. And when I say people, I'll add culture. You have a culture of integrity, a culture of, of serving, right? Because most organizations actually were created to serve, right? Not just to help us get a salary. So you have the people, you have the processes, so you have very strong processes, and that helps with your structure, governance, the financial accountability, so you have the right processes in place that helps the organization to meet its mandate or its vision. She said it, you have the technology and the tools, right? You have QuickBooks, you have, all what you need to make your work more automated, more easier, more flexible, and reach, your objective, faster. And I wanted to add, you actually have your footprint. We'll talk about sustainability. If you do that, and by all means, it's not easy, right? But if you do that, you have an organization where 70% of your work in terms of sustainability is done. So you can now focus on the programmatic approach. So I always encourage you to have this, a holistic and integrated approach, so that when you now just focus on the project side, a big part of the work has been done. And when the funder looks at you, the funder can see a well-oiled and running machine. And when I say structure, of course, monitor and evaluation, which I think we might touch some way down the road. Thank you.
Okay, so just to get some clarification, you had said that they need 4 things.
Yes.
And I heard you mention people and processes, and could you just clarify what the other 2 are?
Say that again?
Could you clarify what the other 2 are?
Oh, as I said, one was people.
People, yes.
The second was the processes.
Yes.
You have the technology,
right,
which she mentioned,
right,
and I dare say, the sustainability, like environmental impact, your footprint that you have. It's a critical part of, you operating, right? If you're operating in an environment, and when I mean footprint, it goes from waste recycling to eliminating waste even in your processes. So that footprint is very important. We need to be conscious, of what we do, and we need to make sure that if I'm working in Alberta, I want to make sure that when I leave, or the next person comes, everything around me was not touched or was not damaged, We tend to forget those little things, and we don't develop that culture of environmental awareness. So we don't recycle, we don't even think about it. We think when we say carbon footprint is for the Boeing, for the Amazon, and etc. While, it concerns us also because the impact touches us also, right? So that aspect of, environmental awareness for me, I think is also key, and I try to push people to also to consider that.
Absolutely, thank you. And I'll start with you on this one.
Yes.
How can Black-led organizations ensure that they have secure funding models in place for their programs?
So, and I know sometimes I tend to be a bit hard with organization.
And that's okay, we need that sometimes.
Yes.
Who agrees that sometimes
yes.
we need that? We need some tough love and some real talk. So go ahead, sure.
A lot of time we have, organizations that were created to do good work. A lot of time they were just created to do good work and they stop there. There's nothing else. People don't take the extra step in building the organization and put them in the position where, they're having an impact, which makes it easy for the funding side. We see a lot of organizations that have very beautiful websites, a lot of talk, but zero activity. And they are requesting all kinds of funding. And some of them are not shy. They will request funding for $1 million. The reality is that, we as Black people, if we create an organization that has a mandate, we need to do our own part. And our own part means that, we need to have please forgive me, I don't want to use a big word. We need to have a strategic plan that tells us what are our objectives in 3 months, in 6 months, in 1 year. Organizations like the intermediary are providing a lot of tools that makes that work relatively easier than before. Before, we didn't have all the support. We didn't even have the opportunity. I mean, I'm just amazed by the number of black people. I come from BC, where you see a black man on the street, you run to us and you hug. So I'm just amazed, to see this number where I can, network with others, right? So let us endeavor to make sure that we have a proper structure in place. Let us endeavor that we start small. It's okay. It is okay to start with 2 people. It is okay to impact 1 person. You are making a difference because that 1 person has a whole family behind. If you do that in a systematic manner, the rest will come. Because when you ask for the funding, and let's say you are in front of a funder, and you're speaking to the funder, it's easy for you to say what you're doing because you are actually doing it. And you know the feedback you're getting when you're doing it. Okay? So my advice would be, let us be organized, let us be structured, okay? Let us make sure that we understand funders' requirement, because a lot of time people don't even read. They just say funder and they just apply. Let us understand the mandate of the funder, make sure that it's aligned with what we want. Let us seek help, and yes, I know it's not easy to work with another black person, but let us seek help with other black people, okay? And then we can go after. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much. And to you, Neka, so I'm just going to ask you to keep it under 2 minutes with your responses so that we get through all the questions that we have here. So what should Black-led organizations be focusing on so that they have secure funding models in place?
Thank you. Franklin, I'm still laughing at what he said, and it's true, it's a reality. I forgot to mention that the Edmonton Community Foundation is the largest non-governmental funder in the city, and we fund charities. And so we get grant requests on a daily basis. What I would advise is that groups and organizations, apart from checking what the funders' goals or mission and funding alignments are, look at timelines and deadlines. We see instances where groups just send in their request on the day of the timeline, and we can't help when it happens. But we did try to be flexible, so we do have some rolling grants, and then we have opportunities for organizations to reach out to us and have the conversation about what they're seeking for or what they want to fund. We also do have instances, and it's not just for ECF, I see it with a lot of funders, where they drop an email or a phone number of a contact person that you could contact and get more information about the grant stream or the funding opportunity. Please utilize that. I used to be at the other side. I used to be the ED of a charity that applied for grants. And I didn't understand how important that was, because sometimes you might have a plan in your head of how to apply, but when you reach out and have that conversation, it could be a 15 minutes call or a 30 minutes Zoom meeting, but you get all the clarity you need. That's in the application stage or pre-application stage. While you're applying, please be careful with your budgets. We review thousands of applications, so when you submit a budget that says that you're paying for example, a pen, and you'll be paying $20, and another group is submitting a budget for $1 for the same pen, it's a red flag. We take cognizance of such requests and we flag it, and because we see tons of requests, we set it aside, attend to others, and then reach out to say, hey, could you work on this, your budget? But then again, remember, most grant streams are oversubscribed. For example, we just concluded the Canadian Government Recovery Fund, and ECF had a budget of, I think, 2.8 million, but we received requests of up to 9.3 million. So the grant stream was actually, that funding opportunity was oversubscribed. And so the onus is to get it right the first time. I know it's stressful, but we do have that opportunity or that open door policy where you could contact any member of the staff of any funding organization to reach out to ask those questions that you might have that can guide your processes.
Thank you so much.
Since I've been limited to 2 minutes, I'll stop talking here.
That's okay. That's okay. And thank you so much for
But I'll be around. Sorry. But I'll be around after. If you have questions to ask me, I will hang around a bit after this session.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for getting into the technical part of it, because that's important as well. And if we had time, I would have loved to go into the reasons why we do things last minute and what we can do about that, because that does impact the quality of the application itself. Absolutely, yeah. And same question to you, Sam.
Thanks, Lindsay. So last time I flipped the narrative. This time I'm going to expand it. So Franklin and Nneka spoke really well around, what Black-led organizations can do in terms of their technical and operational processes to be able to ensure sustainable funding. The other piece of this pie is the funder dynamic. And I've had the opportunity to be a funder both, at federal level with Global Affairs Canada and now with the city. So, look, I think it's important to be upfront that Black-led organizations are not operating in a funding atmosphere and in a funding system that is favorable towards them, right? We are operating in systems where the history of these funding systems, especially government and public funding, right? And the current context is skewed in a big way and inherent with systems bias and even structural racists embedded within the systems. So a big piece of this too, for Black-led organizations has to do with the systems navigation around how do you then navigate within a system where you are dealing with this systemic barriers, right? So I think it's really important to understand that when we get into these systems, all of the things that Franklin and Nneka spoke about, the bar is raised a bit higher, right? Because we're being, skewed and tilted in a biased kind of way. So when you do submit those applications and your funding, the expectation is not just that it's okay, right? But the bar is a bit high in ensuring that it's really good, right? The other piece of it is also, we are in a stage right now in Canada where in most, major cities, on the backdrop of the murder of George Floyd and the Black Lives Matter movement, most of our major cities are currently drafting their anti-racism strategies. So there's a big piece around advocacy that Black-led organizations need to be able to play within your respective cities or at federal or provincial levels. One of the pillars that racism stands on is funding and economic disempowerment. So I think to be able to network and collaborate, to be able to get into that, advocacy space. And because a lot of what you're doing is not just carving out, social outcomes for community, but also trying to change the system and change that platform. So there's also a big opportunity here, I think, that we have, which is rare, but big to be able to do that advocacy within systems and governments.
Yeah, really, really like that advocacy piece, because we need that, especially, especially in this current environment. So we need to be riding on that wave. To you, Nneka, how can organizations measure and communicate the impact of their sustainability to funders and their stakeholders? So yeah, again, 2 minutes so that we can get through all the questions. Yeah.
This is an interesting part because it will feature the second hat I wear at the Edmonton Community Foundation, which is communications. For most grant streams, there's a reporting part where the funder would reach out to ask questions about their funding, where you finally get to the approval part and you've been funded for a project. It will be good for the organizations, for the Black-led organizations, to think about how to communicate successes. So you would have created your KPIs or a method of evaluating how you have achieved your success. Sometimes they're quantitative, sometimes they're qualitative. You would have your data, which you could gather through surveys, through focus group conversations. Now, leveraging on technology, you could use this to tell your story. Another way you could do this is I know most groups and organizations have volunteer appreciation events. It would be great to invite your funders to this space where they have one-on-one communications with not just you, but also your volunteers and the community you serve. That way they see the impact of your work in that community firsthand. I remember when we started, I did have some stakeholders where I work that were doubting. I wouldn't say doubting, but they were kind of curious about why we funded some certain projects, and they were invited to the spaces. And at the end of the event, I was pulled aside to say, hey, why didn't we give these people more money? How much did we give them? And I told them, and they were like, why didn't we give them more money? That's because they have been in that space to see the work that has been done. You can't overemphasize that. In communications, I try to leverage on the power of storytelling. I'm African, and I understand that when I am filling a report that is digital, I am limited to how I want to or how I can give the report back to the funder. So it will be great to leverage on the power of storytelling, and you could do that in a meeting. At ECF, we have started exploring verbal reporting mechanisms. We tried both sides to explore verbal application. Technically, it put a lot of burden on us as funders to collect notes during meetings of funding requests. So we decided to pivot that to verbal reporting. And the feedback we got from most of our organizations is that they are able to actually be themselves, to actually share their learnings, observations, and also the successes of programs we've funded. And I think verbal reporting is going to be a thing that has come to stay. It's a way we get to build relationships as well with the community groups we fund.
Thank you so much. A wealth of experience. Thank you. Franklin, same question to you.
I do recognize that I took 3 minutes in the first part, so I will keep it really short and sweet this time.
I'm giving you 2 minutes. I'm saying 2 minutes because I know you'll take 5. So.
Now I will take just 1 minute. So
no, it's okay. It's okay.
we have a problem with governance and reporting. We all know that, right? That we do have a problem with governance and reporting. Look, in your blood, monitoring and evaluation needs to be part of the deal. You don't need somebody to tell you, because in reality, it helps you as an organization really know if you're meeting the objectives of the money that, of the impact that you want to have. So it's a good tool for you to acquire the skills of monitoring and evaluation. So monitoring and evaluation is critical for any organization. And when you master it, your reporting is simple because the data speaks for itself. And as my dear colleague here, Nineka, mentioned, you can now have your storytelling. And actually, the forms are specifically written in a way that if you have data, it's easy for you to report it, more than to let, we like talking, let you ramble. So learn to do your tracer studies. I have a grant. And most of the time, even if you look at the terms of references, it directs you on how you're supposed to do your monetary evaluation because the outputs are there, right? The outputs are clearly, written out. And another thing I would like to say is, for you to master monetary and evaluation, you have to master how to do a simple logic frame, right? And if you're doing a logic frame, if you master that art, believe me, and I don't know why most of the nonprofits that come to me, they don't even know the term. It helps you to have your activities, helps you to have your output, helps you to have your outcome, helps you to have even the full impact. Once you master that simple tool, believe me, the rest becomes easy. So I will encourage everyone, to have, as part of the tools that you're using, a proper monitoring and evaluation plan. And as she mentioned, afterwards, if you need help, you can even give me an email. I can send you some small templates that can help. Yes, 1 minute.
Thank you. So I have personally had challenges with monitoring and evaluation with our partners worldwide because what they come back with is that it's expensive first and foremost, and that it's time consuming, but really important. So we've been trying to find ways to make sure that we build that into our projects and into our proposal so that we know that is something that they must absolutely do. Otherwise, we have no way of communicating and proving our impact, right? Yeah. And Sam?
Man, so Franklin, I got your problem here from the first round, right, where all the great responses have already been said. And you did say, I think you said most of it. So maybe what I'll give you is a bit of like funder inside information and inside sort of jam of awareness. So I think it's really important for organizations to know that, you know, when us as funders, when we fund a project or we fund an organization, we are also really interested about the impact that that project or that organization is making. So when we fund an organization or a program, we start to follow you. We follow you on social media. I have the advantage of having a couple of assets in community, multicultural liaisons who I'll ask to sort of go to your events and go to your programs. I usually show up at some of the bigger, like the fundraising things. So we're also then interested around the impact of what's happening. So I think the communications piece of this, I think it just encapsulates everything that Neka and Franklin said, that try and attach the funder directly to the communities so they see the impact. Really watch, you know, the stories that you share on your public and social, you know, media platforms, because we as the funders are intimately also interested, and we brag to each other, right? Neka will say, hey, you know, I funded that organization. Yes. And that's how an organization builds reputation, because then I also want to fund that organization the next funding cycle. So that's a bit of insider information.
We actually fight to fund groups.
So yeah, just quickly from the three of you, what is the motivation or the motivator behind funders? What motivates you to go out there and say, we're going to back this project up, we're going to give it all, and we want to see this impact? Impact.
For me, it's to see that issues are being addressed and the impact is being made. That's on the equity strategy hat that I wear. For the comms, I'd love to see our brand, my brand, on the projects that we fund. Sometimes when I'm talking to some organizations and when they approach us for funding, I ask, do you have any other funder on this table? And once they say the city of Edmonton, it's okay, fine, we're doing it. Or if it's an Africa Center, sometimes it's a phone call to Sam or Sharif or Sandra, and I ask, I don't know this group, but they're here with a proposal, and they say you're supporting it. And if they say, oh yes, we are, it's a good one to go ahead with. So for me and my organization, it's just the impact. We're trying to bridge the gap and fund projects and programs that would otherwise not be funded. We also understand that Black-led, Black-serving and focused organizations struggle. Just like my brother Sam mentioned here, the discrimination and the barriers are real. And so being able to reduce that and do the work in the communities is our motivation.
Yeah, I think Neka said the word, it's impact that we're really looking at. In my role, I cover the spectrum of the immigration and settlement ecosystem. So what I'm doing is I'm looking at that ecosystem and asking myself, are there organizations that are doing really good work in terms of providing supports for seniors? I always feel like we're doing badly in terms of really supporting the youth and bringing them up. So I'm looking at which organizations are having impact across that area. So looking at the ecosystem, and with that sort of systems approach, it's identifying who's doing well in this space and who needs to be amplified to do well. So ultimately, as Neka said, it's impact is the word.
Mm-hmm. And for you guys in the audience, what Sam just said, heard the same sentiments being echoed a couple of weeks ago, that we are letting our young people down here in this city, in the Black community. There aren't many programs that are supporting the youth, and we have an over-representation of them in the legal justice system here, and that's something that needs to change. So we definitely need to be stepping up and going into that space, because if we lose our young people, then we have no future to talk about. So that is definitely an area that we need to be thinking long and hard about as a community, and see if there are ways that we can start mentoring and supporting our young black men and and women. Franklin, yes.
So I want to use an example, to kind of encapsulate what both of them said. So there's an organization, Black Women Business Network, that is 2 years old. Their first project that they did, I think the budget was about $100,000. What they did at the end of that project, first of all, during the project was, all the activities that would tag the funder. So on social media and etc., they tagged the funder, and then the funder started retweeting. That's first thing. Two, they were very, very disciplined in the execution of the project. With very clear, I spoke about the logic framework, very clear line of activities and the impact and etc. When the project finished, the reporting was simple. They asked them just a simple reporting, but they added and they sent an impact report. So they designed a very professional impact report that they sent to the funder. Immediately, the funder asked to meet. And not only did they do an impact report, they made suggestions for that project, how, that project has impacted the community and has opened, with conversations with the community, storytelling conversations, where they capture additional needs, they shared it in the report. And, the funder sat and said, okay, we really like this. How can we support you for, the other things? And that funder has grown from $100,000 to $1.5 million within less than 2 years. Okay? So the impact report is extremely important. Professionalism is extremely important. The interaction, I'm very happy because these guys will give me money. So the interaction is very important, Yes, I wanted just to add that.
Awesome. So you've just gone into my next question here, which is about how grant-making organizations and philanthropists can support the sustainability efforts of grant-seeking organizations. How can you do that? Neka.
Good question.
And we are all ears.
This can be done in so many ways, but it's the ability to address the elephant in the room. Firstly, we need to understand that B3, so please, when I say B3, I mean Black-led, Black-serving, and Black-focused organizations are not starting at the same point with other mainstream organizations. That understanding of equity and coming to developing grant streams with an equity lens it's very important. B3 organizations have been missed out in the scheme of things for a very long time. And that awareness and education for ourselves as funders to find creative ways that we can fund groups, it's really important. In 2020, the pandemic hit, and a lot of funders were scrambling to find ways to continually support groups. And while a lot of initiatives were being launched and funding was put out there, the George Floyd incidents happened. And then there was this protest around the country, and then there was this awareness about how much the Black community has been left behind, especially in the philanthropic space. And that's the space where we play. And I remember being part of a conversation about putting together a grant stream that could quickly respond to needs of the Black community. I did reach out to some groups locally, I recall this conversation I had. It was a phone call. I called her up, and then I said, oh, I'm reaching out to you because we just launched an anti-racism grant stream, and I was wondering what your current pressures were and if you needed funding. There was just that mistrust. She was like, why are you calling me? Why now? Why would a funder call me? And I told her I wanted to learn more about the group, her group, and what the work they were doing in the community. And she said, oh, we're in the advocacy space. We work with marginalized youth, Black youths that are heavily represented in the system and in the justice system. And I said, oh, okay, yes, I would like to learn more. And she was like, no, I don't think you want to learn more. I don't think you as a funder will want to fund such projects. And I said, try me. And she hung up the phone. And I didn't relent. I reached out again, but I gave her time. I gave her a couple of weeks and a couple of months, and then gradually started building a relationship with her. There's broken trust. Funders need to fix it. Because if you don't trust us as funders, there is no way we can work together. There's a saying that he who comes to equity must come with clean hands. So if you're coming to equity, you have to understand my pain, and I would have to understand your pain. And so based on my learning from engaging with community, I was able to get ECF to start thinking differently about how we fund B3 organizations. Thank you. But there's so much work to be done. It's not finished yet. We are not done yet. It's continual. We need to understand what the pressures are. We need to also understand how to help B3 organizations build capacity. There's this conversation about deficit thinking. Some school of thought says it won't be fair to apply deficit thinking to B3 organizations based on the fact that we have to reduce barriers to allow them access funding. And I beg to defer to that school of thought because we're not reducing barriers to allow funding, but we're trying to make it equitable because you have a longer race to run. You're not starting from the same starting point. And funders across the country are beginning to think differently. So that's my thought on that.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. Thank you so much. And that brings me to the definition of equality and equity being two different things. But yeah, definitely for another day.
Yes.
Not
yes.
today.
So people say we want to apply equality, but I don't think it's fair.
Right.
Equity is the concept for this.
Right. Absolutely, totally agree. And Sam, 1.5 minutes?
Yeah, I'll just need a minute for this. So thank you, Neka. You have a lot of context, with the foundation around this work. So I think that governments need to move more into partnership with private sponsorship. We're not doing well at the city in terms of these partnerships. We have one specific program. It's a legacy program that I inherited. It's called the Out of School Time, where the city puts in about $100,000 every year into this fund. And then we also have other public institutions like the United Way, but a lot of the money that's in there is coming from the private foundations. And as Neka said, this is old white money, right? And with a lot of power. The Africa Center, one of the Africa Center's director, Emmanuel, sits with me. We're the only non-white people at that steering committee, right? So even as city, even if government, we're not sitting at that table with power. The power is resting with the private equity funds. So that's the reality. I also, in my own private thinking, I also think about us, black people in a broader way. And maybe it's good that these three dominant intermediaries are starting to emerge, across the country. And thinking about how we can position ourselves as an economic hub for black people, so we sit with that power, we sit with those resources, and with that money, with that same equal platform. So maybe I'm talking about SBCCI 2.0 here, but but this is thinking that we need to have collectively around how we have and leverage, you know, our numbers and our capacity to have that kind of money and power.
And that goes into the thinking that we need to be broadening our thinking into non-traditional coalitions, not doing things that haven't always been done, and innovating around who we could be partnering with and collaborating with for our programs and impact. And so we're going into the last question, and this question is, what are the trends and developments that you see happening or emerging now that could support the sustainability efforts of Black-led organizations? Actually, what are the things that these organizations should be focusing on as we go into the future?
I'll take that one. So yeah, part of my job is to kind of forecast sort of what's coming before it comes. So as a sector, we're prepared. One of the things that's foremost in my mind right now is the federal government's rapid immigration policy. So we know last year the federal government announced that they're going to ramp up the amount of migrants that are coming up to about 500,000 annually. This already started last year. I think it was 486,000 was the target, and we met it. And so this is moving. So we are getting, and I think about a third to half of those migrants are going to be from sub-Saharan Africa. So we are about to get hit by an influx of our brothers and sisters who are coming from Southern Africa. A lot of them are coming through the highly skilled immigrant program, so their needs will be unique and different to what we're used to. We're getting lawyers, doctors, neurosurgeons, flight engineers, and some of them are even coming with money, but we have some of the old problems, right, around racism, employment inequity, maybe some language things that they need to navigate. Housing is going to become a key challenge. You know, being able to translate foreign trained credentials to be able to working with the guilds and the sectors, the professional guilds, to be able to provide supports to these types of migrants who are coming in. So I think this is immediate and ongoing in terms of how we might need to position ourselves. And of course, they're coming with families, right? So it's that whole stream of supports that we need to be figuring out. Attached to that is we're also starting to see a lot of issues around, you know, climate change. Right now in the Horn of Africa and East Africa, we're having, you know, big crisis around droughts. The Sahel region, right? That's just, you know, south of the Sahara, Mali and Chad. So we will likely also be getting our first climate change, you know, climate ecological refugees, I think is the term, that are coming in. So we need to be geared for that. And there's also dollars that are being positioned and funding that is being positioned around. So whenever there's a challenge, there's also the funding that's starting to come out along that. So those are two areas that I'm seeing that are coming up. And also there's, you know, a lot of resources that are being put into those areas.
Definitely big conversations that we need to have in preparation for things like that. And glad that you have that insight and that you have that data that we can start having conversations around and making sure that we're positioning ourselves and we're actually at the forefront of it, not just reacting, but that we're actually prepared for what's coming. Same question to you, Neka. What do you see in your space?
I would say impact investments. A lot of funders are thinking out of the box and trying to find creative ways to fund projects so that in addition to grant funding, they're also looking at making impact investments in organizations and groups that they support. Something else that also comes to mind is funders also want to brag about the work they are doing, and so evaluation matrix, just like my brother Franklin mentioned, it will be good to be able to find creative ways to tell your stories, your data, when you're sharing your report to show the picture, to give a big picture of the work you're doing. And then most of the times the funders pick it and also amplify it as well.
Just recently, I was invited for a pep talk, right, by Heritage Patrimoine Canada, HA Canada, you had all the regional managers and deputy ministers. There were 4 organizations that were invited. Actually, they didn't know, but the other organization, one of the organizations was my wife's organization, but I stayed quiet. So they said something that was very interesting. For the longest time, they were working with only 2 black organizations. What changed was that there is a black lady that joined the team. You might not know, but Heritage Canada has one of the lowest amount of black people in that organization. One of the lowest. So that black lady who came said, why are we working for the last 10 years with just 2 organizations when there are other organizations that are having an even much bigger impact? So what I'm seeing is, you know, as we are increasing our representation in these structures, decision-making structures, some of the people are standing up. Whereas before they didn't say anything, now they're standing up and saying, wait a minute, the statistics needs to change, you know. And that, for me, is a call to each and every one of us here. You know, when we say that we have a lot of our young kids in the system, it's a failure on our part. Do not just sit and say, oh, those young kids, they go and take jobs. It is a failure on our part. We are the role models. We are the visible representation of these kids, right? So if we keep our, let me use a very polite word, our acts right, you know, we have less of them. So as we are looking at, you know, the sustainability aspect of our you know, our activities and the rest, I think that, you know, this needs to be represented in the way we, you know, we manage our organization and the way we portray ourselves towards the decision-making bodies. It is easy to spend the whole time screaming, oh, I'm George Floyd, you killed and all whatnot, but what do they see? Still empty shells. You didn't come with a proper project, proper metrics. You know, you didn't explain to them, you know, the impact of that project, how it's helping moving you from one point to the other. So I will end by saying, you know, for us, it's a rally call. Our brothers are coming. If they come and they find out that it's the same mentality that they left back home, it is still a failure on our part, right? We need to hold each other because let me tell you, of all the races that we see around here, we are the most divided ones, right? And that's the truth. So if we do that, if I can look over her, if I'm her gatekeeper and she's my gatekeeper, doesn't matter if she's Sudanese or Ethiopian and I'm Cameroonian or Nigeria, you know, and I learn from her best practices, she learns from my best practices, you know, I can see my brother who can tell me, look, be professional when you're applying so that this is the way they really want it, and have the opportunity to even speak to him beyond just a form that is coming to me. And I am intentional in terms of operational excellence. Black is beautiful. Let it not be a vain word, right? When I'm intentional, then we will see things happening, and that sustainability part will be just a logical output of it.
Absolutely, absolutely. And what you just ended with there is exactly what Sam started with, that it's about credibility, it's about building trust, it's about how we present ourselves, and that's an output of who we are each and every day. We get to a destination by taking one step at a time. You just don't wake up in Calgary, for example. You actually have to take the steps to take that journey. And it's who you are on that journey that's going to determine the result and the impact that you have, that you're going to have. So to sum up everything that you've said here, which is a lot, and I think we could have more and more conversations. There's so many pathways that we could explore from what they've all shared from their different experiences. But really, my main takeaway from this is that we need operational excellence. We need to understand the ecosystem that we're operating in. We need to have better systems and processes in place. We need a very good understanding of what our impact is and be able to communicate that impact. we need to cultivate relationships with our funders, really understand them, and build a culture of trust and respect. And really, if we get those things right, then it's not going to be easy, for sure. We're going to have challenges, but that's where we all come in together to learn from each other and support each other. And this is one of the great things that we're doing as an African community, bringing all of us together to share our experiences. So really grateful to everybody who has put in the work and given us this time to sit up here and share our thoughts and experiences around how we can build more sustainable communities. So thank you so much to our panelists, and thank you so much to our host. Thank you.
Come on, you can do better. Put your hands together for our lovely panelists, Franklin, Ineka, Sam, and Lindsay. I've got gifts for you.